Hey everyone, Gage Ryan here, and yes, the title is not clickbait. Gravekeepers in 2022 have topped. I don't know. I'm a proud dad right now. I don't know what to say. This is great. It's something cool to see because I wasn't sure that we were ever going to see it again. I mean, the only real consistent competitive Gravekeeper player that I know of is Nick Giles, and he has a whole store to run now. Shout out to Refined Gaming. Also, shout out to MCole40 for the deck list. But looking at the list, first and foremost, is that you can tell that it's a very well-built deck, and it's a very specific deck. This isn't standard by any stretch of the imagination. It's a deck that took a lot of time, and there's a lot of specific one-ups and a lot of specific cards that he puts in for specific matchups. So before I go any further, I think let's just go through the deck list card by card. So first you got Dark Magician and Red Eyes. The Red Eyes package is always a good option for the Gravekeeper deck, but I always lean towards the builds that can do more than just play Necro Valley and summon Dragoon. You see they call them Gravekeeper decks, but they're not really Gravekeeper decks. They play 3 Commandant, the Dark Magician Red Eyes, and then Red Eyes Wyvern. That's not a Gravekeeper deck, it's a Necro Valley Dragoon deck. So I always really preferred the builds like these where it can do more than just one thing. You got 3 Commandant, standard, 2 Spy, 2 Recruiter, and 2 Spiritualist, which is that's pretty crazy. I know that anybody would really look at that at first glance and would say, oh, well, you gotta play 3 Spy, or you gotta play no Spy, or you gotta play 3 Recruiter, and just all these this breaks a lot of the molds that I've seen from Gravekeeper decks, and myself included. I've always been a 3 Spy or no Spy kind of person. I've played 1 in a couple select builds, but by and large, it's always been 3 or 0. I've never really ran with 2 very much. And it's also good because that way you're not constantly having to set your monster and just have that be the end of your turn. With this deck, it can actually do play after play, turn after turn, and actually keep an engine going without just setting and passing. So I do like that. 2 Recruiter, like I said, it's good in 2s. At 3, unless it's in a specific more stun, more trap heavy build, I would say you would probably want to go with 3 Recruiter, but in this build where it kind of tries to keep its engine moving turn after turn, I like 2. And then 2 Spiritualists, like I said. It's a good card. It's a card that you can recur with a couple different things. It's a card you can search whenever you want. And if you have the ability to make Spiritualist, you're usually in pretty good shape, unless they have very specific cards. And then 1 Descendant, 1 Priest, and 1 Shaman. So I'm not sure how I feel about Shaman, to be honest with you. Shaman is good. Shaman was really good when, MST was everywhere. But now with Cosmic Cyclone and all these other ways that get rid of Necro Valley without destroying it, I'm not really sure how effective this card would be nowadays. I've tested some games with this deck, and it's actually done really well. It's very consistent, except for one game that I'll show at the end here. But with Shaman, it seems a little bit too situational, at least for my taste. He's the one that tops, so who am I to say anything? But if it was a level 4, I would probably play it. But it's a level 6, man. You gotta bring it out with Spy. It's terrible to draw. You can only really use it with Spiritualist at that point, etc., etc. But the 1 Descendant's good, recur it back with Priest, or you can send it off Spiritualist. You can search it whenever you need to. You bring it out with Spy. It's like a pudding cess almost, so I like it. And then the 1 Priest, Priest is it's a good one of. I always tend to play it at 1. I really hate whenever I have 2 and 3 of it in my GK lists, because I just find oftentimes I draw 1 and 2 without any other monsters or without Commandant, and it's the worst, and it makes me want to light my hand on fire. It's always better to run 1, I feel, at least in most cases. And the last monster is 2 Ash. Ash is just great, generic, stops fusion spells, all that. That's it for monsters. Onto the spells. You got triple Necro Valley. Staple. Card's good. Throne, it's a good Rhoda. It's a good way to get to your other monsters. You never use the normal summon effect, ever. And then 2 Royal Tributes, which is another kind of an interesting decision. And I understand why he did it, but I am just not a fan of Royal Tribute anymore. I haven't really played, sometimes I play Tribute Turbo builds for fun and whatnot, but I haven't played Royal Tribute in a competitive Gravekeeper deck in years. Because I just find that most often it's not good past turn 1. You have to go first, you have to open it, and you have to have Necro Valley, and you have to have few monsters. And I find that it's dead 75% of the time, and it's absolutely broken 25% of the time. And it makes good hands better and bad hands worse. I'm not a fan of Royal Tribute. I do understand the logic of only playing 2 just so he's not drawing these bad hands with multiple tributes and no Necro Valley, but I'm still just not a fan of the card, but I see why he played it. And 2 Red Eyes Fusion. I mean, Red Eyes Fusion is pretty self-explanatory. It's a good generic boss monster for pretty much any stun deck. You got 1 Pot of Prosperity and 1 Card of Demise, which is another, like, it's interesting. Like, it's all these one-ofs and all these interesting numbers that you normally don't see with Gravekeepers, or really any deck for that matter, but I see why he would play the 1 Prosperity, because you never really want to play a second one. Because unlike a lot of Gravekeeper decks where the extra deck isn't super important, he actually uses his extra deck, so I get the appeal of only playing 1, and it's just such a good consistency card. You can't really afford to not play it. And Card of Demise, honestly, I think Card of Demise is not the best in this deck. You have Shaman, you have Ash Blossoms, you have Dark Magician, you have Red Eyes. If you don't have any monsters on the field and you draw into a card like Imperial Tomb, or if you're going first and you open Dark Ruler or Lightning Storm, like, they're just cards you don't really want to draw at specific times, so I'm not sure how much I like Card of Demise in this particular kind of build, but Demise is still a good card. I mean, really, drawing 3 is almost never a bad thing. And 1 Stell, believe it or not, actually kind of strong in this deck. The little bit that I've been testing, Stell has actually come in handy. I mean, because again, this deck keeps an engine going turn after turn rather than just kind of flipping and sitting, so to speak. 1 Raigeki, this is something I've been doing in a lot of my decks, especially in my Gravekeepers, is maining a Raigeki and siding a Raigeki. I mean, Raigeki, anytime you're trying to break a field, is never really the worst card to have. I mean, even if they have, like, let's say negations and they try to negate this, or if you play another card, they negate it, then you can bait that out and then Raigeki them. Like, there's a lot of utility that Raigeki has, and I like it. And then 1 Lightning Storm. It's kind of awkward in this deck. I'm not sure how much I like it. It's a card that I dead draw a lot when I test this deck out. I mean, it is a really good card. I mean, especially if you're trying to break fields, but it's also not as good going first, and it's also dead against certain matchups, but it is a good card, so I do get why he played it. Then 1 Dark Ruler No More. I mean, this card's fantastic. I mean, especially because you're going to be able to make plays in response to your opponent rather than just setting spy and hoping for the best, so to speak. It's good to have cards like Dark Ruler No More if you know that you're going to throw a 3300 Spiritualist on the field, or have a Red Eyes Fusion in hand, or whatever have you. So Dark Ruler actually combos really well with certain pieces in this deck. That's it for spells on the traps. Triple Tombs. Yeah, Triple Tombs. I normally hate 3 Imperial Tombs, but I get why he does in this deck, because it's almost impossible to not have a Gravekeeper on the board at some point. And even if you don't have a Gravekeeper, if you have Red Eyes out, it really doesn't matter anyway. So I kind of like the 3 Tombs. I still would probably recommend 2, but the 3 Tombs is just to max it out, make sure that you see it. It works well in the grind games. If you have that 3rd one and your opponent doesn't have that extra card to play afterwards, then the 3rd Tomb can really come in handy. But yeah, 2 or 3, either one. I mean, it's a great card, and you can search it out with Spiritualist and whatnot. Then Double Rite of Spirit. Yeah, man. I haven't seen this card in a Gravekeeper deck in quite some time. I used to tech it in some of my lists. It's actually a fun card to play. I find that with turn 1 and turn 2, once you get past that, these cards like Rite of Spirit, these other one-ups that I mentioned, like Stella and whatnot, actually come in really handy. This is a deck that has the ability to make plays in response, but can also grind really well. And I like that this deck has that balance to it. And Double Evenly Matched, I mean, you know, it's one of the most unfair cards in the entire game, but I mean, you know, if it's here, you might as well play it. And Double Gozen Match, I mean, it's excellent, you know, smashes Sword Soul and all that shit. And then 1 There Can Be, just as a one-of. I mean, you do play a lot of spellcasters in the deck, but I mean, you know, even if you have this and you have like a Spy or something like that, if you have this out against the right deck, it really doesn't matter anyway. So 42 cards, yes, let that be a lesson to all you Gravekeeper players out there. I really do think that 42 and 43 is the way to go for Gravekeepers. I'm not a fan of 40-card Gravekeeper decks. Unless it's a very specific, like, combo-centric build, like back in the day with Summon Sorceress and whatnot. There are certain builds where you need to see certain cards every single game, and for those kind of builds I can understand 40, but by and large, when you're playing stun and control-based Gravekeepers, 42 and 43 is really the way to go. That's it for main. Onto the extra. You got the 1 Red Eyes, obviously, 3 Supernaturalist, 1 Castell, one of the best rank 4s. You got Black Ship, Gaga Cowboy, Steel Storm Roach, Master Key Beetle, Best Dweller, 101. Onto the links, you got the Majestus link, really, really good with Recruiter. You go Recruiter into this thing, go Commandant, go Necro Valley if you have no other options. Just a good card to have. Anaconda, because you go Red Eyes with it. You got Nightmare Phoenix and Boral Sword, just because they're good generic utilities to have. Zipper Extra onto the side real quick. You got the one Lancia. I mean, just a good card to have. I mean, really, it stops a lot of decks really dead in their tracks. It's a hand trap, so you don't have to worry about summoning it. You can play it anytime you want. It's a good card. You got Tunabiru, which is just great at shutting down a whole lot of combo decks. You got Feather Duster, which just blows out a whole lot of decks like Eldritch if you know when to play it, etc., etc. Got the second Raigeki I mentioned. Dark Ruler No More, he mains one, sides one. It's just, again, good board breaker card. I mean, I feel like a lot of this side deck is really about, like, plugging in certain cards for specific situations rather than having a bunch of floodgates to stop specific decks. You got Evac, which is just good generic removal. One Witch's Strike, which is a card I've tried to implement in a lot of my lists, Gravekeepers or otherwise, with little to no success. Like, I don't know, it just feels like every time that I have it, my opponent all of a sudden decides that they don't want to negate any of my shit. I mean, all the credit in the world to getting to top 8 with Witch's Strike in your deck, man, because that is an accomplishment, because it is not easy playing this card, at least in my experience it hasn't been. Yeah, one Strike, just good utility. Second there can be, which, I mean, again, just shuts down so many decks. One Iron Wall, which stops Flenderies, among other things. One Summon Limit, yeah, man, I told you, Summon Limit's a good card. Play it in your Gravekeepers, play it in pretty much any of your stun decks. Card's amazing. And then close it out with 3 Impermanents. It's really a card that if you're not maining it, you're probably siding it. Like, it's just a good generic, can stop a lot of combos, can stop a lot of plays. It's a good out to DP, Scythe, and all that fun stuff, so. But yeah, I'm really impressed with the deck. I'm very excited to see that this deck was able to top again. I did a little bit of playing with the deck myself, the specific build card for card. I even kind of modeled a different list after it that I'm working on right now. If you guys want to see that, let me know. But I'm going to close this out with showing you one game that I just had before I started recording, where it was pretty much the worst opening I've ever had in my entire life. But anyways, I really hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, be sure to leave a comment, subscribe, ring the bell. You guys know what to do, and I'll see you soon.